So I was asked to talk about the good, the capital G good. And I'm really grateful that they gave you the easiest subject to talk about. Yeah, but we've also heard little code words related to that were floating around in the last 2 days, like the common good, or that things are getting better, or that things are getting worse. Or we have talked about our values contrasted to dark and dangerous forces. And so this reminds me of a time, a very long time ago, when our good friend Plato was faced with a meaning crisis. A meaning crisis that's not completely unlike the one we face now. In fact, the meaning crisis which he faced was in large part responsible for the ultimate fall of Athens. And the thinkers just before him, they were looking to find the arche. They were looking to find the head, the principle, right? Trying to figure out what is behind everything and trying to use reason to do so. And they were having something of a fight or something of a row over what it is that all of this is pointing to. And of course, many answers were proposed as to what the principle behind reality is. Some people said fire, change, or water, limitless, and other ideas like that. Interesting ideas, but there was one guy, this one pesky fellow, Democritus, who proposed that the world was simply void and matter. Atoms, right? Little unbreakable bits of stuff that bounced around each other, stuck to each other in order to constitute the things of the world. And I remember my high school teacher telling me that it was funny how thousands of years later, it was Democritus that had won the debate, right? The world is made of atoms. Now, our good friend Plato, recording the words of Socrates, and facing this meaning crisis, came to a different conclusion, that behind the world are eternal ideas, eternal forms. And we often mistakenly think that these forms are just something like concepts or identities, but Plato's highest form was the form of the good. Now, that's different. That's not just an identity. It's not just a concept. It's something like the precondition for identity. All right, let me explain that. It's not just how things exist, but why they exist. They exist to participate in the good. And of course, for later Christians that would convert out of this pagan world, they would look back and find in the book of Genesis something similar. And they would see that God creates the world and he says that it is good. And it's not just that God has goodness, like a quality, but as much for the Neoplatonists as for the rabbis, the Christian saints, and the Muslim philosophers, the transcendent one God, the ineffable source of all things, is indistinguishable from the good. And all things are created to participate and be in communion with that goodness. So what a strange idea to us today, who know better, right? Like, we know that the world is made of stuff, right? That Democritus was right. It's made of atoms and forces and space-time and a big bang and billions of years of stuff coming together and in this or that way. Right? That's what we believe. At least that is the belief that permeates our secular culture. And when we act on that fundamental principle, then all we have to do as humans is understand how stuff works. And we have been amazing at that. I mean, we've been unparalleled in the known history of the world at figuring out how stuff works, how to get stuff, how to make stuff, how to accumulate stuff, and how to constantly increase our capacity to get and make stuff. And in many ways, several of us have convinced ourselves that human flourishing happens when people have enough stuff. Now, of course, there's a corollary to that, which is that to understand, get, make, and control stuff, you need three things. You need understanding, you need will, and you need power. And you will be able to recognize any atheistic system worth its salt because it will always emphasize those three things: understanding how stuff works, will, directed energy in action, and power, the energy we need to do your will. And this was as true of Nietzsche as it was of Marx, and it's also true of Ayn Rand. And in these three, you have the three strains of modern politics: the communist tendency, the fascist tendency, and the libertarian tendency. All three are posited on understanding, will, and power. Now, the problem is that this idea that the world is just made of stuff and all we need to do is understand, make, and get stuff it's a lie. And it's not just a lie, but it's a lie that has become manifest in one of the very reasons why we are having this conference today. When we hear pronouncements like we have lost our values, and because of that the social fabric is fragmented, our societies are breaking apart. This is happening precisely at the moment when we have the most stuff. The refusal of people to have children, the mental health crisis, the loneliness, the despair, and the hopelessness is happening all precisely when, and to a large extent, because we have more stuff than any visible time in history that we can identify. So what's happening? The truth is that Democritus was wrong. Now let me translate this for you. What does it mean to lose your values? To lose what you value? It means to lose what is good. What does it mean to despair? But to be incapable of perceiving that which is good. And what does it mean to fragment, if not to forget why and how it is good to be together? To forget the reason why we're together in the first place. So I think we have to be careful. And as I see everybody talking about progress, and I hear people talking about human flourishing, we have to be careful and wonder what it is that we actually mean by that. If what we mean is we just need to get the governments out of our way so that we can have more stuff, and that we need to tackle the environmental concerns so that we can all have more stuff and more powerful stuff and bigger and faster and stronger stuff, then I think there's a very important warning to be had. I mean, of course, as a Christian, I believe strongly that we are called to help the poor. But if all we do in the world is get everybody to have more stuff, we will not solve the problem of despair, of sterility, of fragmentation, divorce. In fact, we will increase it. And so it seems like the ideas that Plato brought to light have to be explored and taken seriously once again. That is, the world can no longer be described only in terms of forces and stuff, but it has to be described in terms of categories of human consciousness, like attention, like relevance, like care. And maybe for some of you that is too much of a jump to say that the world is made of care, or that the world is made of love. But at least an acknowledgement that the human world is made of care, right? That without care, there is death. That without care, there's paralysis. And if we care for the wrong things, then there is chaos and tyranny in our lives and in our societies.